Dare great things for Christ. Christ calls us to dare great things. In the marketplace, as well as in the mission field, there has never been a time like the present for the spirit of the Catholic entrepreneur. Now is the time for men and women of great courage and great vision to engage our church and our culture. Now is the time to dare great things. And here is your host as we dare great things, Father Nathan Cromley, the president and founder of the St. John Institute.
When we follow Jesus in our daily life, we are faced with many challenges. Rising up to meet those challenges in accordance with His grace means that we will be making an impact, changing the world around us. Instead of letting the world take its own course, we are leading it in His name. Rising up to meet these challenges gives us a great opportunity to depend more on Jesus. This is something St. Paul definitely understood and embodied in his life. This is part 2 in our series, In the Pattern of Paul, Insights into Leadership. Hey everybody, glad to be back with you again. We're here to go deeper, right, at the St. John Leadership Network into what leadership looks like for those of us who are trying to actually follow Jesus. We all know that leadership is kind of the rage these days. There's books on it, seminars about it, different places that we can go in order to learn, well, basically how to step into the roles of responsibility that we have in the world and to really do a good job with those roles. So whenever you think about leadership, don't think about it in terms of something grandiose. Think of it as something as real as you meeting the challenges of your life successfully, right? And so to do that, you've got all kinds of classes and self-help materials and things that come from the world and come from a worldly perspective. And these are not necessarily bad. In fact, most of them are excellent. We need more of those types of things out there to build up the world and to build up people. My question is just, does the church have anything to say about this? What does the Bible have to say about leadership? And I'm always astounded that for many people, that's like a new question, or they wonder, gosh, like, does the Bible actually have anything to say about leadership? Because for most people, they say that the Bible is a spiritual thing, faith is a spiritual thing, and by that they really mean something that has very little impact in their daily life, or very little consequence on what they do. For most people, spirituality is a place where they go in order to find consolation, maybe inspiration, but however we use it, most of the time our spirituality, our faith life, is something that speaks to our emotions, something very deep down inside, but we don't really let it impact the real decisions that we make as parents, for example, as we try to rear our children. I mean, do we really let the church speak to us about how to teach our children about money? About whether or not our children, should get a job when they're young. Do you think that there's any advice out there from the lives of the saints about how to rear children? Well, most of us would look and say, well, we don't know, but we don't really want to know either. Because in the end, if we start to take the faith to guide us in our leadership, well, then our faith is going to have to become something real to us in the end. You see, your faith becomes as real to you as the degree to which you implement it to help you make practical decisions in your life. Let's just be realistic about it. I mean, I meet people as a priest all the time who tell me that they don't need faith. It's amazing. I don't need faith. I'm spiritual, but not religious. I'm like, but it's very hard to talk to these people because usually when they're saying that, it's coming from a place of vulnerability. It's also in a spot where you really can't talk about it. They're not intending to really investigate with you what that means, but you'd like to ask them. You'd like to be able to say, what does that mean to be spiritual, but not religious? I just would really like to know, because what spirituality are you following if it doesn't come from a religion? Think about it. I'm spiritual, but in what way? Who's teaching you about God? Who's connecting you with God? What's the name of the God whom you're serving? Where does that come from? It's fascinating to me. Now, they don't mean that. They don't mean it so technically. That's the problem, though, because since we never can define what they mean, we can't even begin to dialogue with them. Look, why can't you find your spirituality coming from your religion? And the reason is because the moment spirituality comes from religion, it becomes practical. Religion carries with it a way of living, a tradition of life, guidance for practical things. And when you become a spiritual person who becomes religious, well, then your religion starts to impact everything that you do. And just frankly, a lot of people don't want that. Well, that's too bad. I'm sorry for them, because to the degree that your life is not impacted by the one that you love, your love remains ineffectual. This is the beautiful thing about being a Christian. If you really want to step forward in your relationship with Christ, allow Christ to lead you in the decisions that you have to make with your money, with your job, with your family, with the things that matter to you. Because to the degree that you allow love to guide you, your love for Jesus to guide you in these practical things, is the degree that your love for Christ will become real and deep. You know, I hear it all the time from people. Father, I just don't know why I need to go to Mass. I don't know why I need to go to church. I don't think like I really need God. They'll even say that. I've talked to people who have said that. You can keep your God, Father. I don't need him. You know, but it's an amazing thought. I'm like, why don't they feel like they need God? And the answer is because they're not even trying to allow God to lead them in their life. They're leading the life according to their own passions, which are usually influenced, of course, by the desires of others. I mean, in the end, who of us is going to live really the autonomous life of saying, I'm living completely free, independent of anyone's approval or anyone's acceptance of me? That's not the way it works. Most of the time, the life we live is a craven slavishness towards the approval of others. We want to be accepted in the group. We want to do what everyone says is right. We want to have the approval and win the esteem of other people. Well, in that case, then I guess that's the God that you're serving. And you're right. Maybe you don't need Jesus Christ of Nazareth to live a life like that. You're doing just fine on your own. My question is, isn't there a greater way to live? Is that really the way for authentic freedom? Is that really the way for you to claim your identity and be who you are? Is that as deep as you want to live, making the people around you happy, making sure that you don't make waves in society? Is that seriously it? Because if it is, I got an invitation for you to freedom and to claiming a life that is all yours because it comes from him and is inspired by a love for him, which is deeper and broader and more beautiful and more fruitful, and it's all for you. See, we don't have to live lives of anonymity, lost in social mores. We can live a life that is autonomous and free if it comes from a love that is deeper than our own selfishness or our own pride. And that's the beautiful thing about Christianity. We're a religion of love. Right? A love for him, a passionate drive for God. And the intensity of love is measured by the degree to which it encompasses everything that we have. We need to let love consume us like a fire, consume the elements of our life, get down into the nitty-gritty, be a part of the decisions that we make with our business, for example. The decisions that we make with the stances that we take in society. Someone who's in love doesn't put their friend, the one whom they love, in a box and say, you can only interact with me when I feel like it. You know, someone who's in love yields their life to the one that they love. It's just common sense. And I'm here on behalf of Jesus Christ to say, let him in. Let him in to the depths of the real places that you are struggling. Your decision points, the places of your trials, the places of your sadness, the places of your joy and of your ambition. Let Jesus Christ be what fuels you deep inside. And when you do that, you'll suddenly discover a whole new element to your faith and a whole depth to it that allows you to then lead in his name and become his instrument. And that's exactly what St. Paul did, and that's exactly what I want to talk about in today's lesson.
Would you like to hear more from Father Nathan? Join the St. John Leadership Network and receive a 2-minute glance at the gospel every Sunday morning right to your phone. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
You know, the easiest way to look like a saint is to not try to be one. Here's what I mean by that. If we can act like a saint on the outside, act like a holy person on the outside by simply being nice and never letting people really see what we do when pressure is on us. Right? So if it's really easy to talk about being a great mom until you have 4 kids or 5 kids or even one kid, right? Like, and then all of a sudden, like all of the aspirations that you have to be this wonderful mother and to be this radiant person, full of joy and grace with a beautiful home and wonderful children go right out the window when your toddler hits 2. And then when you have 2 of them that are there, under 3 and so forth, everything seems to fall apart. And why? Because inside we tend to fall apart. Leadership is real and puts a real demand on us. I remember a friend of mine saying, Father, remember this, business is a full contact sport. And what he meant by that is it's going to impact your psychology. It's going to impact your physicality. It's a full contact sport. You're going to rise every day to meet these challenges and the stressors that are on you. You've got to be ready, even in your physicality, to sustain that kind of life. And we don't usually think of it that way, but it's really true. Parenting is a full contact sport. Anytime that you step forward in leadership, every aspect of you suddenly comes into the light. And just like when you hold a piece of glass up into the sunlight, you see all of its marks, all of its spots, all of its cracks. In the same way, the moment that you start to lead, you realize just how far from the ideal of Christianity you really are. And a lot of us, therefore, we do 2 things. Either we hide our Christianity in a box and we say that that's a whole part of me that has nothing to do with my leadership. Or on the other hand, we give up on our leadership and we put it in a box and we say it's better for me to not even try and to at least appear good than to try and convince everybody that I actually am not good, right? And so either one of those extremes is not the way to go. The answer lies in what St. Paul shows us. And here I'm talking about a book that I wrote on the subject, right? It's called Coached by Paul the Apostle. It's available from Scepter Publishing. It's the best book I ever wrote because it's the only book I ever wrote. And Coached by Paul the Apostle. And in chapter 2 of that book, I try to outline this foundational truth that for Paul, he moved forward in his life amidst all of the stressors and with a million reasons to quit, because that was where he found Jesus. See, instead of saying I need to have perfection before I even try to be perfect, which is of course false, that would be like saying I need to be absolutely one with Jesus and then I'll lead. Well, you're never going to lead because you're never going to feel like you're absolutely one with Jesus. Or on the other hand, you could say like, since I'm not perfect, I won't even try anymore. Well, that's the same thing that we could say. St. Paul could have done that. He could have said, look, the way I persecuted Christians, there's absolutely no reason for me to now look like a hypocrite and stand in front of those very Christians and proclaim that they should have faith in the God that I persecuted. Paul had every reason to stop, just like you have every reason to stop. You can look at your own lives, your own failure points, everything you're ashamed of, and you can say to yourself, well, that's proof. That's proof that I shouldn't even be trying. And when you do that, you'll let somebody else take the stand and take society, take the groups that you could influence into a place where maybe they shouldn't be. I mean, when you look at some of the decisions that are made by leaders today, these are not informed by the gospel. You have all kinds of situations and all kinds of decisions where innocent people are suffering and human rights are violated. And it's because Christians haven't stood up strongly enough to lead in the name of Christ. Because when we don't, we let other people who lead in the name of money or self-thing or whatever kind of ideology is there in front of them, and they'll take the stage because we all feel like we're unworthy. Well, I mean, it's like maybe we are all unworthy, but maybe that's really not the point. Maybe the point is that Jesus Christ is the Redeemer of unworthy people, and he wants us to glorify him by showing the power of his grace and not the worth of our own perfection. And so he'll ask, we're unworthy people and people that otherwise are deeply afflicted with all kinds of problems, and say, I want you to lead not because of your strength, but because of my grace. It's like, I'm not going to call the equipped. I'm going to equip the called. All right, the question is not stop getting in my way. And this is what St. Paul did that was so marvelous. St. Paul did not get in his way. St. Paul had every reason to say that he was not going to lead because of his past. And yet he stood up and did it anyway because Jesus Christ called him to it. And so our life, we don't glorify St. Paul for St. Paul's sake, but we glorify Jesus. And because we see Jesus glorified in St. Paul, and he gives us hope and he gives us an example. And what St. Paul shows us is that in the reality of everything that he was doing, he met with a lot of difficulty. I mean, you can look at the difficulty on the outside, for example. Just think about all of the places where his body was punished by what he had to do. You have at least five riots that form around St. Paul, with the people wanting to tear his body apart. You have him beaten with rods, beaten with fists, beaten with stones, beaten with whips, beaten with scourges. I mean, that's 5 different kinds of beatings. Okay, and does he ever stop? Well, no. Well, I mean, like, my goodness, look at everything that he had to carry on the inside. He had to be as persecuted by people. That means that they're following after. That's what persecution means. Persequere in Latin. It means to follow behind as you, like a hound dog after its prey. He had people that wanted to kill him. They found out, for example, what he said in Lystra when he went to Derbe. And then he goes to Derbe, and the people, then they find out from Lystra that he's in Derbe, and they go after him. He has to flee from Derbe to go all the way back again. They find out what he's doing in Jerusalem and Damascus, and they send people to knife him in Damascus. Then they find out what he's doing when he's in Thessaloniki, when he goes to Berea, and then they send people into Berea, from Berea to Athens. They're following him, trying to trip him up. And he has to deal with the fact that people in his own audience are going to betray him, that the people that he trusts are going to betray him. And in fact, sometimes they do. He has social pressures of the powerful people in society rejecting him, the social pressures of the non-powerful people in society not listening to him. And Paul just pushes ahead, his eyes fixed in faith on Christ, and he doesn't stop. Why? Because in all of these challenges, Paul, as he says, in all these things, we are more than conquerors. Well, that's quite a thing. This is Romans 8. He says, hunger and persecution and nakedness and danger and in the sword, all these things. He says, every day I go out like a lamb in front of the butchers. That's what he says. And yet in all these things, I am more than a conqueror in Christ Jesus, who has loved me. Right? So it's like, my goodness. See, the problem isn't on the outside. Leadership thrives on problems, because problems give us a chance to change the world. Like, for us to rise up and meet the problems that are in front of us, that's the first step to changing them. Right? And if we're going to meet them with God, then problems are our playing field. I need to run. It's not the problems on the outside that matter. It's the problems on the inside. It's the doubt in our heart. It's the pride in our heart. It's in our heart, our own way of judging ourselves outside of Christ. And so we say, I'm not worthy to speak in his name. I'm not worthy to be his minister. I'm not. And Jesus is smiling at us the whole time, being like, that's where you begin. Where you're saying you stop is actually where I say you begin. Because it's not a question of you being worthy. It's a question of you being called and following that call. If we do that, you know what's going to happen, everyone? We're going to suddenly need Jesus. You see? We're going to need him, because we're not sufficient of our own to rise up and lead the lives that we're supposed to lead. We're not sufficient on our own to do what we're called to do in our daily life. We absolutely need Jesus in order to be the loving, radiant people that we know we want to be in his name. And this is where St. Paul teaches us that leadership leads us to dependency on Christ. And that is the doorway to holiness.
Would you like to start your Thursday mornings with a scriptural leadership lesson? Join the St. John Leadership Network, where Father Nathan hosts a 30-minute call at 6:30 a.m. in all 4 U.S. time zones. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
In our church's tradition, the saints have had a big part to play in helping us understand some of the riches that are found in the gospel. And we call it our tradition. Well, in the tradition of the church, that is the writings and the lives of the saints who have lived their life following Jesus, there's a reference point where the saints have pointed us back, saying, when you want to know what you're supposed to be following when it comes to living out Christ's disciples of Christ in the world, the example is that of the Passion. Jesus taught us things. He did things that are so great and astounding that most of us will never be given the grace to do because that's not our place. Working miracles is what I'm thinking, raising the dead and all of this. I mean, obviously that has a place for many, but like for many others, it's not where God's calling us. So you say, well, then what am I supposed to imitate? As I follow this, where's my example? In the tradition of the church, the saints point us back to say, you follow Jesus in his sacred passion. Right? So as he looked to the heavens and then embraced the cross and gave all of his strength that he had, his talents, his skills, so to speak, for us in our world, just as he took his strength to carry the cross, so we deploy our talents and our skills and our time and the grind of our life into accomplishing what we need to do. Okay, so this is a wonderful thing. And we do that in the toil and the labor that we are called to engage in as members of a family, as members of a society, as runners, people who run a business, right? All these things, that's the daily context, and it's like a passion. Because just as the Lord used his strength to carry his cross, to make of himself a sacrifice of love to the Father, well, so in the same way, we who are Christians, we deploy our strengths in the places where God gave us to lead, and we accept the pain and the suffering as we sacrifice our life to the Father as an act of love. And we do this also, of course, by loving the people that are around us. I think about when I give an example of what a mother is, for example. I often think of a mother like a candle. All of the beauty of a candle, its light, its heat, its radiance. It's just so lovely to see the flame burning in a room. And wherever a candle is lit, people gather around. And of course, you see this in the radiance of a young mom. And everyone she's a source of life. And the children gathered around her because in her they find love and acceptance and guidance and strength. And it's beautiful. And yet the thing is as a candle burns, the flame is burning the wax. And the longer that flame burns, the less of the candle that there is. A mother and a father, right, literally pour their lives out for their children. And they come to the end of their days too weak to even breathe. And then finally finish their lives. But they finish them because they gave them. They gave their lives to their children. And all of us know that there's no other way to really live than to live by dying. Well, that's following Christ in his passion. You don't have to be a good parent, just like you don't have to expand your business. Matter of fact, you don't even have to try to get a job if you don't want to. You don't have to do a lot of things in life. But life isn't about what we have to do. Life is about what we get to do because we've chosen to give our life as a gift of love to other people. And as a gift of love to other people because of our love for our God. And yeah, will it cost us? Absolutely. That's why we look to the passion of the Lord, because it cost him his life to save this world and to save us. And it cost him his life as he gave himself to the Father's hands, confident that the Father would raise him again from the dead. Just as we are confident that we too will be risen again from the dead. You see, it's an amazing thought that we're actually living out in our life and like a little incarnation of the passion. He shared with us this opportunity to look at our life as an opportunity to serve, to be poured out, to give, to lift up. And for that, we need to embrace this vocation of leadership as the place where we do that. Well, if we look at his passion as the example and following in his footsteps, then we also realize that there's no other way for us to live it except the way that he did. If we want to live it as Christians, if we don't want to live it as Christians, there's many ways to live it, right? But none of them are good. You want to live it as a Christian? Okay, then we look at Jesus as the pattern. And this is what I mean. You embracing your leadership in his name does not mean that suddenly you no longer lead, that you have to put your intelligence in a box or make your decisions in some sort of esoteric fashion as you feel the Holy Spirit is guiding you or whatever it might be. That might be valid, but it's also valid to make your decision based upon the numbers, and based upon the decisions that you've always made them on. There's nothing wrong about being a business person. There's just something wrong about being a business person outside of God. Why not let God be the what leads you in your business? Why don't you let God be the one who's leading you in your parenting? Why don't you let God, instead of thinking that he's going to destroy the beautiful things that you like in your life, what if you gave him a chance to, instead of destroying them, perfect them? Because that's exactly what he's always done. That's exactly what he's the God who made everything that is beautiful and everything that is good. Why do you think that letting him into your leadership would somehow make your leadership less effectual or less impactful or make your life somehow not good? I know that we can be afraid of the cross because we say, well, he's going to bring us to the cross. I remember listening to a fellow tell me, I said, why aren't you following Jesus? And he said, because everyone who follows Jesus suffers, and I'm terrified of suffering, And like, I can understand that, right? That's a genuine feeling, and we can understand that. But in the end, like, my friend, suffering is really not the problem because you're suffering already. You're suffering more by your fear of suffering than any real suffering could ever bring you. Well, I would say the same thing. You think your life is excellent outside of God, but in fact, the real excellence it can find inside of God makes everything else pale in comparison. St. Paul, in the way that he followed Christ, gives us such an example. He met Jesus by exerting himself. He found holiness by trying to bring it to others. He had to overcome all of the inner obstacles in his heart that kept him at bay by trusting in the God who brought all of those inner obstacles to be seen by everybody as he tried to do what he was called to do. You stepping into leadership is an occasion for you to meet Jesus and to grow in your faith. This is why God calls you into it. It's not even the results that come out of your leadership that are the most important. It's the results that come in your leadership that are the most important. What this will do for you as it makes you dependent on Jesus, meet Jesus, know Jesus, and love Jesus. And that, my friend, is a treasure you're going to take with you into eternal life, where everything that you are and that you know in Jesus is one with him for all eternity. And that begins here on earth. And it begins the moment you start leading in his name.
Dare great things for Christ.
Share your feedback with Father Nathan. Send us an email at communications@stjohninstitute.org. That's communications@stjohninstitute.org. And visit www.stjohninstitute.org and sign up for our newsletter to receive updates from Father Nathan.